Solomon comes to the throne following his father David, roughly scholars believe at the age of 17. There are some historians that place that age being much younger, some that place it a little older. A great average is 17 years old. He's a young man. And right off the bat, he has to deal with some complex palace issues. There are some men that have been with David for years that can't continue on as they were. Joab is most notable. Encourage you this past week on Outlaw Radio, I taught an entire Bible study on Joab. He's a fascinating character. He's one of only 3 characters in the Bible that is constantly referred to as the son of his mother and not the son of his father. He's a very complicated, interesting person. Joab, as to summarize it, he was a man without a king. Joab was a man that thought he could serve God without respecting God's authorities in his life. There's a profound message, lesson, application to Joab's life. I would encourage you to go online, go to our website, find the Bible study, and listen to it. But Solomon has to deal with Joab. He has to deal with Abiathar, the high priest. He has to deal with Shimei. He deals with these issues. There is now peace within the kingdom, peace within the palace, and that segues us to chapter 3. It is notable that we're also transitioning in another book of the Bible as well. We are officially moving from 1 Chronicles and our harmony to 2 Chronicles. So a lot of what we'll look at here in chapter 3 can be found in 2 Chronicles chapter 1, most notably the first 12 verses. We will stay, though, this morning in 1 Kings 3. The chapter opens, "Now Solomon made a treaty with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and married Pharaoh's daughter. Then he brought her to the city of David until he had finished building his own house and the house of the Lord and the wall around Jerusalem." About 3 years, give or take, have passed. Solomon's still young. He's around 20 years of age. And one of his first big moves is to strike an accord to formalize a peace deal with really the predominant empire to the south, that being Egypt. Egypt was a perpetual notable enemy of the children of Israel, enslaving the children of Israel for roughly 400 years before the Exodus. There's a long history and track record between the Israelites and the Egyptians, and so this does make a lot of political sense. Solomon is wanting to usher in Israel into a golden age, a period of peace and prosperity, which we'll look at, and part of doing that was to have an accord and alliance with the biggest power to the south, that being the Egyptian Empire. And as was customary in that day, to signify, to seal, to codify the peace agreement, there would be a union, a marriage between the king and, we're told here, Pharaoh's daughter. He marries Pharaoh's daughter, he brings her back to Jerusalem, and they live in the city. Now, according to the way that the text plays itself out, this is the first marriage of Solomon, that it might be easy to just reach the conclusion that this was wife number 1. However, that's likely not the case. In 1 Kings 14, verse 21, we're told that Rehoboam, who is Solomon's son, comes to the throne at the age of 41. Now that's important because in 1 Kings 11:42, we're told that Solomon reigned for 40 years. So Solomon is on the throne for 40 years. One of the acts that he does is marrying this woman from Pharaoh's daughter, and yet Rehoboam was born a year before the reign of Solomon began, meaning that Rehoboam's mother, more than likely, is Solomon's first wife, indicating that here, now we see a problem, because Solomon is not learning the lessons of his father, and he is now accumulating to himself wives. This will be a big problem in the life of Solomon, because he'll accumulate 700 wives and 300 live-in girlfriends over the course of his life. He was a ladies' man, an ancient Hugh Hefner. So Solomon makes a treaty. He signs, seals the treaty by marrying Pharaoh's daughter while he already has a wife and a child. Not a good move. In Deuteronomy 7, verses 1 through 4, again in Deuteronomy 17, we're told that the kings were forbidden from accumulating wives. But beyond that, in Deuteronomy 7, God tells the children of Israel, really all of the men, that they needed to marry Hebrew women. And in fact, they were forbidden from marrying pagan women. Now, there are some commentators that describe this as being kind of a universal ideal that the Jewish men were forbidden from marrying any non-Jewish women. And that's not actually the case. In fact, there's several notable instances of Hebrew men marrying non-Jewish women. Boaz married a Moabitess by the name of Ruth, and that was not a criticism. She ends up being the great-great-grandmother of David. You have Rahab, who was a harlot, also marrying in. In fact, if you look back at Deuteronomy chapter 7, 1 through 4, you can read it on your own, but the prohibition wasn't just a universal thing of like, hey, intermarrying is forbidden. We need to purify the race. There's none of that nonsense. And in fact, there was 7 specific Canaanite people groups that they were forbidden from marrying because of their demonic elements and influences. Notable, the Moabites were not included, which is why Ruth. So right here, the Egyptians were not within this list. So Solomon is not making a mistake by marrying an Egyptian because she's an Egyptian. He's making a mistake because he's already married. That's why he's making a mistake. And this will set the tone, the tenor, the direction for a lot of mistakes that Solomon will make. Verse 2. Meanwhile, the people sacrificed at the high places because there was no house built for the name of the Lord until those days. And Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of his father David, except that he sacrificed and burned incense at the high places. Now the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the great high place. Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. A few interesting details that are worth noting here. If you go down to the middle part of verse 15, following what happens at Gibeon, we read, and then Solomon comes to Jerusalem, stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, offering up burnt offerings, offered peace offerings, made a feast for his servants. We've noted this before, we've made mention of it, that during the reign of David, there was an interesting spiritual dynamic evident within the nation. And that was this odd separation. You won't hear too many Bible studies about this, but it is kind of crazy to consider and to think that you have during this really roughly maybe 80 to 100 year period of Israel's history, where you have the tabernacle, which is the place of meeting, the place of sacrifice, the place of offering, the place where the priest officiated the worship of God at Gibeon, this town of Gibeon. But the Ark of the Covenant, kind of the central artifact of the tabernacle, wasn't with the tabernacle, but finds itself in other locations and then ultimately in Jerusalem, the city of David. At this time of Solomon will be building the temple. It will take 7 years for this to happen. Over the course of those 7 years, the tabernacle remains at Gibeon, and the Ark of the Covenant is in Jerusalem. And that's a really odd thing. Like, how does the Day of Atonement work? Because the Day of Atonement, the high priest is supposed to go into the Holy of Holies, the most sacred compartment of the tabernacle, where the Ark of the Covenant is kept to sprinkle blood of atonement for the children of Israel. There is no Day of Atonement if the Ark isn't there in the tabernacle. It is a bizarre thing that there's this separation. Solomon goes, according to the text, to Gibeon, the great high place, because that's where the tabernacle was. He has this encounter. We'll look at it. But then he comes back to Jerusalem, and he makes more offerings at the Ark of the Covenant, completely separation. Now, first, why would David, and we have to think about it, why would David keep that separation? Like, why would David, over the course of his life, refuse the tabernacle and the ark from being joined back together? Keep in mind, David's heart was to build a temple. I'm of the opinion, and I think it's logical, that David was worried that if he brought the tabernacle to Jerusalem, put it on the threshing floor of Ornan, had the ark there, that there wouldn't be necessarily a public emphasis or a desire to build a physical building. We already have the tabernacle, it's in this location. That David wanted to keep the two separate to incentivize the building of a temple. He didn't want to give the people an excuse out of it. Beyond that, and again, we are not really given an explanation within the scripture for this really bizarre dynamic. Why would God be okay with it? Because we see this here, right? The passage we just read, God seems to be okay. Solomon loved the Lord, and he goes to the tabernacle, he makes offerings, and he goes to the Ark of the Covenant in Jerusalem, and he makes offerings. And beyond that, there's high places. Now, later in Israel's history, high places will become a really bad thing. And yet right now, God seems to be kind of okay with, like, if there was a high place and you wanted to make your own offering to God, that was fine. Which is, again, kind of a crazy, crazy notion. Deuteronomy 16:21 within the law seems to okay the practice, although that practice will become more illegal when the temple is finally built and instituted. So why? Like, why is God okay with this? Why do we see this dynamic? And we've seen this dynamic really after the 5th or 6th chapter of 1 Samuel. Like, when has the worship of God ever really been happening at the tabernacle? How is this okay? Now, again, I think that the best explanation to this, and this might be controversial, is that God didn't care. Like later on, what ends up getting the people in trouble regarding the temple is that they idolize the temple, they worship the temple, and not really the God in the temple. Keep in mind that the histories have been put together, this is pre-exilic, to articulate something to a group of people whose temple has just been destroyed. Keep that in mind. Like, we have this compilation of 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings. It's presented to a group of people whose temple has been destroyed. The thing that they've idolized has been stripped down, laid bare. They have been taken into exile. And what's the great lesson I think God's trying to communicate to the children of Israel who no longer have a temple, by the way, no longer have a tabernacle, don't have an Ark of the Covenant, have no place to worship? What's the lesson? God doesn't care where you worship. He just cares that you worship. Like, forget about a location to encounter God. You can encounter God wherever you want to. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't a uniqueness or a specialness or a place to have a place. And yet, not when it becomes an idol. Like, hey, I hope you understand, coming to church is important. Like, we're in our little warehouse here off of an industrial parkway. Like, there's nothing intrinsically special about this building, but it is our meeting place. It is a place that we can retreat from our daily lives, the daily grind, that we can go to. And there's a measure of reverence and respect and care that we put into the physical place. There is something special to it. But it shouldn't be an idol. It shouldn't be that important. You know, you drive around and you look at extravagant pieces of property, buildings we call churches, where we've spent thousands and hundreds and millions of dollars constructing and building that are all going to burn. You see what I'm saying? That there's this balance. And I think the lesson here of seeing this division is like, yeah, there's a place that's important. God will bless the temple. But was it that important? Was the tabernacle that important? No, God cares about the heart. He cares about people worshiping. So if you went to the high place like Solomon, or you went to the tabernacle without the ark, or you went to Jerusalem without the tabernacle but you had the ark, God didn't care. He just wanted your worship. And so Solomon here, we're told that he loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of his father, except that he sacrificed burnt offerings at the high places. And again, some commentators would point out like that this was except, the word except being some type of a negative thing or blight. That's actually not the case in the Hebrew language. The word we have here is rak, R-A-Q. And within the Hebrew language, this particular preposition, if it is coming after a negative, so if what has just been articulated within the verse is a negative thing, then the except continues the negative. So if it had been Solomon did not like the Lord and was displeased with the Lord, except, well, then the negative would carry into the negative. But we don't have a negative, do we? We actually have a positive affirmation that what? Solomon loved the Lord, except that means that the except doesn't place what follows into a negative, but is an affirmation of his love. That Solomon worshiped wherever he could worship. The high places, at Gibeon, at Jerusalem, it didn't matter. So he's at Gibeon. And we're told, verse 5, that at Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night. I find that very interesting. In fact, Wednesday night on Outlaw Radio, I'm not going to bore you with it here, but dreamers Dreams, God communicating through dreams. We find a lot of really fascinating examples of God using dreams to communicate to people. That dreams, this weird thing that happens in our brains when we go to sleep, that God can use that to speak to people. He can use it to speak to you. In fact, there's examples, there's passages that say in later days, old men will have visions and young men will dream dreams that God can speak to. Has God ever spoken to you through a dream? Interesting that the two biggest dreamers that we find within the scripture have the same name. We have Joseph of the accounts of Genesis, a dreamer. The other character who dreamed the most that God spoke to and guided through dreams was another Joseph, the husband of Mary. Dreams. We're going to look at that idea on Wednesday night just to tease. But Solomon is here and the Lord appears to him in a dream by night, which is important. I don't know if God speaks through dreams of the daytime nap. It has to be at night. And God said, ask, what shall I give you? Now, wouldn't you love that? God appears to you with a word and he says, hey, just ask whatever you want to ask. There's no qualification. Ask, exclamation point. Whatever you want, I'll give to you. Now, if you're like, wow, that's a thing. That's pretty cool. I would like to just reference that Matthew 7, verse 7, and the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus will say to you and I, ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and the door will be answered. God comes to Solomon, and he says, ask. What do you want? I'll give it to you. Now, why would God ask a question? When God asks questions, you need to understand that God is not trying to ascertain information. As if God was like on pins and needles, I wonder what he really wants. Like God is all-knowing. Like God does not ask questions of us to gain information from us. God doesn't come and say, hey, how you doing? He knows how you're doing. Why does God ask questions? Because he does quite frequently. He asks questions not to gain information from us, but to reveal things to us. He asks questions that are insightful to get us to consider, to think, and then to reply accordingly. God uses questions to get us to think, to consider, to be introspective, insightful. So God already knows, but he's leading Solomon down a train of thought. Ask, what shall I give you? So Solomon said, you have shown great mercy to your servant David my father. And oh, did Solomon know that? Solomon having a first-hand perspective, living within the home. Solomon had seen that his father was a flawed man, and that this relationship that David had with God wasn't based on David's goodness, it wasn't based on his merit, his worthiness, it was based on God's pure goodness and his mercy. So Solomon opens, I know you've shown great mercy to your servant David my father. And how? Because he walked before you in truth and righteousness and uprightness of heart with you. You have continued this great kindness for him, and that you have given him a son to sit on his throne as it is this day. I am, Solomon would say, I'm only here by your mercy. The mercy that you've shown my father is why I'm on the throne. What a wonderful perspective to have as a young man. And so he continues. He says, now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king instead of my father David. Again, Solomon acknowledging that he's king because God had ordained this and anointed it. But I am a little child. I do not know how to go out or come in. And your servant is in the midst of your people, whom you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to be numbered or counted. Now, please understand that this is an indication, insight, into a true humble spirit we find within Solomon at the beginning of his reign. Solomon is humble. This is not a false humility. This is a true humbled spirit. Now, what is humility? Humility is not some self-deprecation, deprecating perspective of self. Woe is me. I'm no good. Look at how terrible I am. Oh, you're so humble. No, you're just an idiot. Like, humility isn't being self-deprecating. Humility can be best defined as having an accurate understanding of oneself. Like pride, in the contrast, is having an inaccurate perspective of oneself. We run into someone who's prideful and we realize, what about them? Their view of themselves, it does not connect to reality. They're filled with pride. Humility is just having an accurate understanding of who you are. And Solomon does. He says, I'm only here because of the mercy that you've shown my father. And I'm only king because you anointed. I didn't earn this. I don't deserve this. I'm not special in that way. In fact, here I am. Your people's awesome. Your nation's immense. I'm just a child. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And what was the truth? He had no idea what he was doing. Like, he just sees himself in an accurate way. That's humility. To see yourself as one is. Now, as a result, therefore, verse 9, his request, in light of all of that he's just said, give to your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil. For who is able to judge this great people of yours? This phrase in the Hebrew, an understanding heart, can be literally translated a hearing heart. What is Solomon asking for more than anything? I'm but a child. I've been shown your grace, your mercy. It's the only reason I'm here. I'm not here because I'm really bringing anything to the table. But I understand how great a task I have, how being a king is this big responsibility that I'm now finding myself in. And what do I need more than anything so that I can be the king I need to be for your people? He says, I need an understanding heart. I need wisdom. What is wisdom? We throw some church terms around a lot, and then we get challenged to define things, and that becomes more difficult. Like, what is wisdom? Wisdom, so you have knowledge. Knowledge is the accumulation of facts, data, figures, knowing things. Have you ever found someone that was really, really, really smart, but stupid as a brick? Right? Someone that has a ton of knowledge, but they have no idea how to take their knowledge and use it in any type of a real world scenario. Have you ever met someone that doesn't know much, but we'd call them street savvy? Like, they don't have a lot of knowledge, but they're smart. Like what is that? You see, wisdom is the appropriate application of knowledge. That's your definition of wisdom. Meaning that knowledge is not a bad thing, especially if you have wisdom. Because the more you know, that's not a bad thing, especially if you know how to apply the things that you know. See, Solomon is asking God for wisdom. God, I don't know much. I have this task. I need your help. I need an understanding heart. I need to know how to do this in an appropriate way. These are your people, and I want to judge them. I want to be able to ascertain between good and evil. I want to represent you well. God, give me wisdom. It's a good request. We're told the speech pleased the Lord, verse 10, that Solomon had asked this thing. So God said to him, because you have asked this thing and have not asked long life for yourself, nor have you asked riches for yourself, nor have you asked the life of your enemies. God lists these things because those are the top three things most of us would really love to ask of God. If God came to you as a genie in the bottle and said, you just rub it the right way and I'll give you whatever you want. I want riches. I want long life. I want my enemies destroyed. Top three. Boom, boom, boom. So God, because Solomon doesn't ask for these things, although that would be the most natural thing to ask for, especially as a 20-year-old, God's like, you know what? Because you haven't asked, and instead you've asked for yourself understanding to discern justice. Behold, I have done according to your words. See, I have given you a wise and understanding heart, so that there has not been anyone like you before you, nor shall any like you arise after you. And I have also given you what you have not asked, both riches and honor, so that there shall not be anyone like you among the kings all your days. Now, I want to point out something interesting about this that I think we get wrong in applying the passage. Most of the time in the application of this passage, you might have heard something like this. Because Solomon didn't ask for long life, and because he didn't ask for riches, and because he didn't ask for his enemies, because Solomon asked for wisdom and not those things, God gave him wisdom and God gave him these things. That it was a transactional agreement that God's responding to Solomon in what he's going to give. But that's not what the text says. I want you to go back. Look at verse 12. God says, behold, I have done according to your word. See, I have given you a wise and understanding heart. Solomon comes to God and he wants what? A wise and understanding heart. And God's like, I've already given that to you. It's a past tense. Like before Solomon comes and has this interaction with God, he had already been given this, meaning that God, in asking the question, is trying to get Solomon to see something important. Because we've already noted that Solomon was quite a wise man. In the previous chapter, he has all of these problems. He's a young man he's got to deal with. His father leaves him, and he deals with each of them differently, but he handles them in a measured, wise way. And that could have led to a haughty heart. That Solomon, as a 20-year-old, thinking, man, I've just dealt with all of these issues. Look at me. And so God comes and he says, what do you want? There's a question for a reason, because God's trying to reveal something to Solomon. And what is he trying to reveal? That he's wise, not because he's wise, but because God had already given him wisdom and had already equipped him for the task. Solomon, don't think you're any good at this. I've made you good at this. It's amazing kind of an idea. The whole exercise is to point out something. Don't think that the wisdom you have right now is intrinsic to you. I've already given you it. Now, you did a good thing by asking for it, but the whole exercise is for me to make it clear to you, I've already given you the wisdom that you need. You know, sometimes we have especially when we get into ministry, or maybe it's a career, to think more of ourselves than we should. Well, I'm really good at this. Well, how? Well, because I went to this school and I had this discipline, I trained under this person. I did all of these things to gain this particular talent or skill set. Did you? Did you? Or did God give them to you? Like, who made you? Who made you with your interests? Who gave you your personality? You know something that God did not give me? Any type of mechanical ability whatsoever. Zero, zilch, nada. I can break something that works. Like, I'm that good at it. I don't have it. Some of you do. Some of you do, and you've never taken a class, you've never gone through a training, you just somehow at some point you just were good at it. You had a knack. How? Some of you are very good at teaching. All of you are good at something. Well, how? Well, it's because God equipped you with that. And don't ever mistake the talent or the ability as somehow just being intrinsic to you. God gave it to you. And so always view it as a gift, as something that God has given. And what does that do? That keeps you in a place of humility. And that's what God is trying to do here with Solomon, to keep him in a place of humility. Now, I do think that there is another element to this that gives us a little insight into something off in Solomon. Something that I think is often off in us. Like the saying, please the Lord. So this wasn't a bad thing, But we should ask, was his request a good thing? And was his motivation behind his request a good thing? Again, going back to the context within the passage, Solomon says he wants wisdom. Why? To do things for God. You see, Solomon, God says you can have anything. If God had come to David and said, David, you could have anything, what would David, the sweet psalmist, the man after God's own heart, probably have answered? I want more of you. I want a greater revelation of you. I want to see you. But Solomon, he what? I want wisdom so I can best serve you and do things for you and represent you. Now, is that bad? No, it's not bad. But is that best? Do you come to God? Is your relationship with God based upon trying to have God help you help him? I think if we're honest, sometimes the answer is yes. But there's a problem, isn't there? Deep down. Solomon wanted to be equipped to serve God. God does not care about our service. He cares about us. Knowing us. Service is a byproduct. It comes after the fact. But Solomon, it'd be like, Zach, what do you want? I want to be a better Bible teacher. Well, we know you need to be. But is that the most important? Do you think that your value, your worth, Zach, our relationship is based upon what you're doing for me? No. What if your kid answered that way? Wouldn't it break your heart? It's like, I don't care what I care about you. A relationship with you. And yet Solomon here, we see something. He continues, so if you walk in my ways, keep my statutes, my commandments, as your father David walked, I will lengthen your days. So Solomon awoke. Indeed, it had been a dream. He came to Jerusalem, stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, offered burnt offerings, offered peace offerings, and made a feast for all of his servants. Verse 16, and the story we're gonna read through the rest of the chapter here is not included in the Chronicles, but it is an example of Solomon's great wisdom. And so this gives us insight into the way in which he was able to execute judgment over Israel. And we're given kind of a hot potato case. We're given a case that in our judicial system would be so complicated that there would be justifiable arguments on each place, that it would have gone through a series of appeals and motions and would have landed at the Supreme Court, the highest court of the land, and we would all, as a nation, be on pins and needles. How is this going to be adjudicated? So what's the story? What's the case? Well, we read that two women who were harlots, and that means what it is. They were harlots. They came to the king, and they stood before him. And one woman said, "Oh, my lord, this woman who and I, we dwell in the same house. And I gave birth while she was in the house. And it happened the third day after I had given birth that this woman also gave birth. And we were together. No one was with us in the house except the two of us in the house. So there were no additional witnesses. And this woman's son died in the night because she laid on him. So she had rolled over, it suffocated him. So she arose in the middle of the night and took my son from my side while your maidservant slept, laid him in her bosom, laid the dead child in my bosom. So when I arose in the morning to nurse my son, so it's likely dark, there he was, dead. But when I examined him in the morning, indeed he was not my son whom I had born. Then the other woman said, No. But the living one is my son, and the dead one is your son. And the first woman said, No. But the dead one is your son. The living one is my son. Thus they spoke before the king. So an argument ensues. So we have like this hot potato case. Two women, two harlots. There are no daddies involved. They both have children born very, very close. So they're very young. One of the women in the middle of the night rolls over, suffocates her child. She discovers this. She keeps her cool. She goes over, she exchanges children. So that the other woman wakes up, finds a dead baby. She freaks out about it. It's a dead baby, but then she examines like, that's not my baby. The other woman's like, no, that is your baby. This is my baby. There are no additional witnesses. So this is your stereotypical, your trademark. She said. There's no other. Now, this is before genetic testing. They're young. We don't know who the fathers are because they're harlots, so there's no ability to play that game out. No DNA, no 23andMe. I mean, this is a grand mystery. What do? You got two women. You've got one live baby, one dead baby. What happens? Now, it's amazing that two harlots have gotten before King Solomon. All right? Within Israel, they would have gone to the gate of their local village. They would have gone before a Levite that had been given jurisdiction over that town to adjudicate, to be a judge over these kind of civil matters. That judge has no idea what to do, which brought it up to another court of appeals. They had no idea what to do, went to another court of appeals. This thing was like news around Israel because now it's gotten to Solomon. And what is Solomon going to do? How is he going to get to the bottom of it? How is he going to figure out who the right, the legit mother is and who's the one lying? What's going to happen? Everyone in the nation is wanting a report. So the king said, the one says, this is my son who lives, and your son is the dead one. The other says, no, but your son is the dead one, my son is the living. So he kind of just recaps the quagmire. So the king said, bring me a sword. Now, everybody's like, whoa. So they brought a sword before the king. And the king said, divide the living child in two and give half to one and half to the other. Simple solution. One baby, two women. We can't get to a resolution. Just cut the baby in half, give each a part, and we'll move on with our merry way. Now, what is Solomon doing? Solomon, again, there's wisdom here because he's trying to move beyond the particulars. He's trying to get to the heart of a loving woman, a loving mother, and who's obviously a crazy person. Like, let's be real. You have to be a crazy person to wake up in the middle of the night, find your dead baby, and think, I'm just going to pull a switcheroo here. Like, crazy woman. So Solomon is like, how can I figure out who's the true mom and who's the crazy one? Let me figure out the human heart here. It's a shrewd move. Let's just cut the baby in half. Let's see what happens. Now, verse 26, then the woman whose son was living, so the real mother here, spoke to the king, for she yearned with compassion for her son. She says, oh, my Lord, give her the living child. Don't do this. Don't kill him. Oh, that's the mom, isn't it? And then crazy rears its head because the other said, let him be neither mine or yours. Let's divide him. And that's not what the real mother's going to say. That's what crazy says. So the game's up. Intentions revealed. So the king answered and said, give the first woman the living child. Don't kill him. She is the mother. And all Israel, as a result, heard of the judgment which the king had rendered, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to administer justice. Solomon earned a reputation. He earned respect. I will say, in a point of application, anybody that wants to divide, there's something about the heart that's off. Like the desire for division to be the just result is often an indication that there's just something not quite right within the heart. Like, I've known people that had genuine issues with the church that they were attending. Not this one, because we're perfect, but other churches that had a genuine grief, a genuine beef, And that went about voicing those concerns or considerations appropriately, the right mechanisms, the right way, going privately, bringing it to leadership. And it just never got resolved the right way. And they reached the conclusion that, you know what, I can't stay here. As much as I love this church and I love the people in this church, this has not been resolved the right way, the way that I think it should be, the way I think it would be biblical. I'm not going to make a stink, and we're just going to move on. I've known people like that. And you know what? And that dynamic, I have a lot of respect. I have a lot of admiration for that. I think they're coming from the right place, and there's a right heart, and there's a right intention. It's just obvious. But if you ever run into somebody else that has a grief, they have a beef, they don't go about it the right way, there's a whole thing that plays itself out. And what do they want to do? They just don't want to leave. They want to cut the church in half. They don't care about the church. They'd rather cut it in half. They'd rather cut the baby in two. Not to say that they don't have maybe some merit to their argument, or there might be some justification in their approach, but you do take a step back and you think, there's something off with that, isn't it? Division. Like we have a God that loves reconciliation, restoration. We don't have a God that's very big into division. In fact, the term we find all over the New Testament, the book of Acts, to describe the church, the great exhortation of Paul over and over and over in most of his letters to the church, filled with sinners and dysfunction and craziness, Corinth, is what? Division? No, there's a constant exhortation for what? Unity. To be unified. To be unified. Solomon, he sees that, man, if there is a desire to cut the baby in two, if that's an appropriate ruling, well, that's just crazy. But the heart of a mother, the heart of love, the heart that cares more about the child than themselves, they would even rather experience a loss because they treasure something bigger, right? I had every intention to cover chapter 4. And I had a great closing exhortation that we just can't get to at all. It was the snipes. They went way too long. One chapter. Oh boy. So Father, we just stop here because this is where we're at. And Lord, I pray that this passage, what we've looked at with Solomon and his request, maybe the location and the temple, or all the different details that we've been able to draw from this one chapter, Lord, different nuggets of truth. Lord, may you take some of them, maybe all of them, maybe even none of them, but just your Spirit work. May we leave here with something from you, a word from you, a little bit of the revelation of you. That's what we ask. In Jesus' name, amen. Yeah, I will close with a thought. Creighton, make sure that we include this at the end of the Bible study. You know, it hit me, and as I'm praying, that Solomon, like, what does God give Solomon? He gives him, well, he says long life, but ironically, Solomon will die before David did. He doesn't live a long life. And he has riches, and he has peace. But you know what's fascinating is that all of those things that God gives him end up contributing to a really terrible plight that Solomon encounters. You didn't ask for all these things, you asked for wisdom, but the wisdom reveals to me that there's an issue with our relationship. So I'm going to give you a whole bunch of things that are going to kind of destroy you. Because in the end of things, I care more about you than what you do for me. Like Solomon will be the king that writes Ecclesiastes. And he'll say, vanity of vanity, says the preacher, all is vanity. Everything is worthless. Solomon would have everything. God would give him everything. Riches and power and prestige and fame and notoriety. And Solomon would reach the conclusion, I had all these things, I drank them deeply, I enjoyed them passionately, and I found no meaning, no fulfillment, no purpose in them all. I served God better than anybody, and my service left me empty. And then he closes Ecclesiastes at the end of his life, which we'll get to. And he says, what's the summary of it all? Fear God and obey him. He comes back to it's just about you and God. We're going to look next week at Solomon's reign and the peace and the prosperity was not a betterment for Israel. It led them into a deep place of apathy and compromise. And as a little tease, as great of a reign of Solomon, these 40 years, the golden age of Israel, the zenith of their power and wealth and influence, immediately came a divided kingdom. It all fell apart. Because God doesn't care about what we do. He cares about who we are. He cares about our relationship with him. So don't allow the other stuff to distract you. You got me? Have a wonderful week. May you be filled with God's Spirit. Don't forget, ministry happens when you go out that door and you tell somebody about Jesus. If I don't see you here, there, or in the air, I'll see you guys next Sunday. God bless. You're dismissed.